Hi, folks. So I'm here today talking to you about a very important action that's happening tomorrow in Los Angeles that I hope everybody will come out for. And what it is, it's helping Jane Fonda celebrate her birthday as she closes her Wells Fargo account and removes apparently millions of dollars from Wells Fargo. And this is part of the nationwide effort to defund the Dakota Access Pipeline. As people may or may not know, there are 17 banks that are funding the building of this pipeline, and Wells Fargo is just one of them. And I had been planning to take my money out of Wells Fargo for a very long time. I already took a lot out and opened a credit union years ago during Occupy, but unfortunately, I still have my mortgage with them, and I'm kind of stuck, so I did keep a checking account there and had a lot of stuff, automatic bill pays coming out of that Wells Fargo account. But this week, I transferred all those automatic bill pays to the credit union. So tomorrow, I'm going to go. I was going to organize something with Carlos Marroquin of the Bernie Sanders Brigade. We were going to do our own action. Bernie Sanders Brigade and Our Revolution Los Angeles, we're going to do our own action to get people to take their money out of Wells Fargo. But then I found out about this action just yesterday, and I thought this sounds fantastic because I know that it's going to get a lot of press because Jane Fonda is going to be there, and also Dolores Huerta, who is a fantastic Latina activist who worked with Cesar Chavez during the grape boycott during the 60s. And she's been a tireless advocate for the farm workers, and now she's supporting the No DAPL movement. Other celebrities that are going to be there are Frances Fisher, who was a great supporter and surrogate for Bernie Sanders for the entire presidential campaign. Also actress Catherine Keener and Lily Tomlin. So some of you may know that Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda have a Netflix show that they do together called Frankie and Grace, or Grace and Frank. Anyway, I love the show. It's on hiatus right now. It's one of those things where you can watch, you can binge watch it, but I try to spread them out, all these Netflix shows and Amazon shows that stream. Anyway, so this is a really important action, and it starts tomorrow. They're asking that you get there at 1:45 to the corner of Hollywood and Vine, and then we're going to be marching to the Wells Fargo branch at 1600 Vine Street. And I'm going to be there, and also my friend Arturo Carmona, who you may have heard me announce is running for Congress. He's running for Javier Becerra's seat, and he is an adamant opponent of this pipeline, and he's going to be closing his Wells Fargo account as well tomorrow. So any of you who are watching who live in Los Angeles, who can get out to the Hollywood area and who have a Wells Fargo account, please come and join us and close your accounts. And I can tell you about the credit union that I belong to, the California Credit Union. It's supposedly just for teachers, but I'm not a teacher, and they let me in. So I know a lot of friends who have other credit unions that they belong to, and credit unions are great. The other thing about Wells Fargo, as you probably know, is they were a big player in the foreclosure movement, and that's how Carlos first started fighting them. He started Occupy Fights Foreclosures, and he's done a lot of actions against Wells Fargo because they were one of the big banks that blew up the economy by giving out all these mortgages, many of them predatory loans, and giving loans to people that should not have gotten them, signing documentation on behalf of people, and then packaging these loans and selling them off to sovereign wealth funds to the point where the whole thing was a big Ponzi scheme. It all collapsed, and the banks ended up holding the bag, and of course Bush bailed them out, and then so did Obama. And what happened was the banks got bailed out, they were made whole, and the homeowners got sold out. And so Wells Fargo was one of the worst players. And then the final thing they did that caused their former CEO, John Stumpf, to resign was they were caught forcing their employees, including their $12 an hour tellers, to sell other products to consumers, other types of credit cards, other types of bank accounts, other types of home loans. and they had sales goals. And if these employees didn't make their sales goals, they were penalized or threatened with being fired. And so many of them opened up these fraudulent accounts to keep their jobs. The customers found out about it, accounts they never opened, and they complained, and the whole thing, the shit hit the fan. And it got to the attention of Washington. And Elizabeth Warren, you might have seen her, she was great. She grilled John Stumpf in the hearing room there in Washington. And he tried to blame it on the employees. Can you imagine? He tried to blame it on these low-level employees. But he ultimately resigned, and there's a new CEO who actually lives here in Los Angeles. We're going to be planning a little surprise for him. Stand by and stay tuned. Anyway, so Wells Fargo is a bad actor for many reasons, and I'm very excited to be going to this thing tomorrow. And then I guess they're going over to Chase Bank, too, after this. So if you have accounts in Chase and you want to close those, they're part of J.P. Morgan Chase. You know, Jamie Dimon is the CEO there. He and Obama are BFFs. They play golf all the time. Speaking of Obama, big announcement today is he just used some sort of law, some land of the sea of the land, I forget the name of the Sanctuary Act from 1953 from the Eisenhower administration to permanently protect certain lands off the coast of the Atlantic and in the Arctic oceans. Now, what they are is the Chukchi and the Beaufort Seas in the Arctic and strings of canyons in the Atlantic running from Maryland up to Massachusetts. So, I don't know, this was something like 181 million acres, and he's like trying to get all this credit for it. Meanwhile, because he wants his legacy to be one as someone who attacked climate change, when in my mind, his legacy is going to be the one that quadrupled fracking, not Texas governor turned president oil man George Bush, but Barack Obama, who, fast-tracked all of these pipeline projects, including the Dakota Access Pipeline, so that all this fracking that he quadrupled could get to market. So now he's coming in at the last minute doing this thing, which even his administration conceded in the press conference today. There's not going to be that much fracking there because the price of oil is so low. And one of the reasons the price of oil is so low is we have overproduced and we ruined our country. If you looked at a map of the United States, an aerial map or a satellite map, you will see how many states are completely dotted with fracking pads and pipelines, and it's really quite horrendous. And so we've got a glut of this stuff, and they're trying desperately to get it to market. Another thing they want to do is liquefied natural gas export terminals, which we have to fight, because right now there's a glut of natural gas, and so they're burning it off into the environment, which is also bad for, climate change. But they want to capture this excess gas and send it through these pipelines to be liquefied and, send it to the pipeline, send it through the pipelines liquefied. I'm not sure. I'm not a scientist. I don't know how they're going to do this, but they want to do these export terminals, off the coast. There's one at Cove Point in Maryland, and then there's one in Washington, I think they just stopped, or maybe it was Oregon. But the idea is that if we get these LNG export terminals, it's going to be really bad, because now all of a sudden they're going to have a way to get this oil and gas to market, or this gas to market to Asia, which is, where they really need it, because we have overproduction in this country. So that is what Obama did today. And let's see. Also talking about natural gas, let's go back to Syria here, because they're talking about the what's happening in Aleppo, and they're making it like it's this huge tragedy, whereas most Syrians consider it to be a liberation. And they're giving us all sorts of propaganda, which is about 180 degrees away from the truth. All you have to do is Google Eva Bartlett. She's a Canadian journalist who has been to Syria at least 6 times. She speaks Arabic. She talks to the people, unlike the journalists for the mainstream corporate media, none of whom are based in Syria. and are all perpetuating this propaganda that Assad is butchering his own people. You remember now that that's exactly the false narrative they used to get us to go to war in Iraq, and they also used to get us to go to war in Libya. These horrible dictators, Saddam Hussein, Muammar Gaddafi, you know, hurting their own people. But of course, we were happy to work with them when our geopolitical interests allied. And we were happy to work with Syria. However, Syria has always been very independent. And what was going on, see, as I've just found out, is that Russia, okay, who is on the side of Syria right now, and that's the big Russian threat. We're trying to foment a whole new Cold War and Russian scare. And as I said on my show the other day, the robust opposition, I had about 6 millennials on the show with me. I said, I'm the only one who remembers in elementary school ducking and covering, you know, doing these exercises where we hid under our desks, which would, they actually laughably thought that would protect us from some sort of nuclear, you know, attack. Anyway, Russia supplies Europe with about a quarter of its oil and gas, and 80% of the gas that Gazprom, the state-owned gas company, produces goes to Europe. So they want to keep that gas flowing. And you know, in 2009 there was a pipeline proposed, a Qatar, however you pronounce it, pipeline that was supposed to go through Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, and Turkey. Now, Assad said no, and so then they proposed an alternative pipeline, the Iran pipeline, that was going to go through Iraq, Syria, and then under the Mediterranean Sea to get to Europe. So Assad agreed to this alternative pipeline in 2001. It was supposed to be completed 2016, but then the Arab Spring delayed the project. So what happened was Qatar has funded the Syrian rebels, what we're calling the moderate rebels. Like, could any rebels be moderate? You know, they're moderate. They were terrorists before we started funding them. Now they're moderate rebels. The Al-Nusra Front and all these other different groups that were linked to Al-Qaeda. So Qatar had funded them to the tune of $3 million, and Saudi Arabia has also been funding the rebels. And Turkey is stuck right in the middle of this because they were going to be the gateway to this new pipeline, that Qatar wanted to do through Syria, but Assad stopped. So now Turkey, Erdogan, is feuding with Assad, and there's also other issues over the independence of Kurdistan. They wanted to have an independent Kurdish state, the Syrians in the Kurds in Syria, but Turkey is threatened by that because they've got Kurds there and they don't want them to leave. So this whole thing with the white helmets, as I outlined in a previous Facebook Live of mine, the white helmets are this supposed humanitarian group. Well, we think that they are actually being funded by these same moderate terrorists, and they're actually going in and out of Turkey and rearming. And instead of bringing supplies, humanitarian aid, in their convoys, they're actually bringing arms. So the whole thing is a big mess. But what you need to know is that, you know, Russia is not the villain. Assad is probably not the villain. I'm sure he's not a nice guy. I mean, these are dictatorships, and dictatorships are brutal, and there are not a lot of civil rights in dictatorships, but, you know, at least they have a certain level of prosperity. You know, the people lead a middle-class lifestyle, and there's education, free education, literacy. Assad's done a lot of things in his country that Gaddafi did in Libya and Castro did in Cuba, but they never want to tell you about these things. So I would suggest you go to Mint Press News, which is a great source of information to get the truth on Syria, and put Syria into the search box, and you can find out a little bit about the country and about what's going on there. You can also go to YouTube and put Eva Bartlett in the search bar and see. She just was here in Los Angeles, and as a matter of fact, Todd Jones went last Saturday night, and he live streamed her whole lecture. So if their version of the live stream, the people that were professionally taping it, if that's not up yet, you can go to Todd Jones's Facebook page, and he probably has it set to public by now. So that is the situation in Syria. Now let's talk about, this country, because the electors are over. They voted for Donald Trump, despite the fact that the entire country was going crazy, thinking they were going to get them to switch and vote for Hillary. Ha, ha, ha. 4 Democratic electors switched their votes, and they were not for Hillary. 3 of them were actually for Colin Powell, which is beyond me. Why Democrats would vote for Colin Powell. I guess they thought he was a moderate Republican that maybe the Republicans would go for. And then they voted for Faith Spotted Eagle, I think is her name, someone who's was arrested at the Dakota Access Pipeline. And one person voted for Bernie, who was in Maine, but they wouldn't count his vote, so he changed it to Hillary. But he gave a great speech. You can Google David Bright is the name of the elector. He did a great speech on why he voted for Bernie, because Bernie supported the millennials, who are the future of the party and indeed the future of the country. And millennials were excited by Bernie. So now that we have Trump installed, we have to look to see what he's going to be doing on the environment. And we already know that he's picked Rex Tillerson for his Secretary of State, and he is the CEO of ExxonMobil. What does he know anything about foreign policy, except for the fact that he's doing deals to develop oil, including with Putin in Russia? So that part of the Russian thing, I totally buy. That is going on. And the conflict of interest there with Rex Tillerson, not to mention Donald Trump himself, are just immense. I don't know how he's going to get around this. It's the emoluments clause of the Constitution that they cannot take foreign money. And if he's got foreign projects, Trump, and he doesn't divest and put his holdings in a blind trust, I just don't see how he can get confirmed. I don't know what the next step of the process is, but that's kind of crazy to me. But anyway, Rex Tillerson is known for his hypocrisy. He has a country place outside of Dallas, and he actually joined a lawsuit to prevent them from building a water tower there. And what were they going to use the water tower for? To provide water for fracking. And he did not want to have fracking in his community. And it's funny, a lot of people don't know this, but Dallas, a few years ago, put a moratorium on all new drilling. So Dallas, you remember J.R. Ewing, and it's the center of the oil industry in the United States, that and I guess Houston, there's no more drilling in Dallas anymore. And so Rex Tillerson, he was a NIMBY, not in my backyard. It's okay for him to frack up the rest of the world, but he didn't want it near his vacation home there. And then the other thing, of course, what we just found out about ExxonMobil is they found out about climate change and the fact that humans caused climate change over 40 years ago. And they, not only did they withhold the information, they actually spread disinformation. And a lot of, attorneys general are suing ExxonMobil now for that. So they're all in all a very bad company, one of the worst. And why we continue to subsidize fossil fuel companies in this country is ridiculous. Bernie was going to stop that, but of course, Trump is not going to stop that. Who does he have? He has, let's see, his Secretary of Energy is Rick Perry. You remember Governor Rick Perry, who is running for president this year. And he started to list the 3 agencies that he was going to eliminate. Well, one of them, the one that he couldn't remember, the Department of Energy, that's the one he's supposed to be heading now. And so this is Rick Perry, who actually is on the board of Energy Transfer Partners, which is the company that is constructing the Dakota Access Pipeline. And he also sued the EPA for their finding that carbon dioxide was a pollutant. That's Rick Perry. Let's see, Scott Pruitt, okay, he's the worst one. He is the head of the EPA. He actually, as Attorney General of Oklahoma, sued the EPA many, many times over their clean air and water rules, okay? So this guy, people are really afraid of it's like putting the fox in charge of the hen house there. And finally, the Interior Secretary is Congressman Ryan Zinke from the state of Montana. I guess he was kind of good when he started out. He's a conservationist, like he pitched himself as a Teddy Roosevelt conservationist, and he didn't want and still says he does not want to sell off public lands, which Trump does, and that he was opposed to efforts to weaken the EPA, and he also supported renewable energy. But since he was elected to Congress, he started caucusing with the Republicans, and he kind of started going in their direction, and basically put forward a bill to extract more coal, gas, oil, and timber from Montana's public lands. So, and if you look to see who his top donor is, it's Oasis Petroleum. So you always have to follow the money, folks. And here's what we've got going. We've got an outgoing administration that's trying to greenwash its actual legacy. We've got an incoming administration that has horrible plans in store for us. And we have us. We the people. So what can we do about this? I think we have to attack this on all fronts. We have to do things like start defunding these pipelines. We all need to take our money out of all these banks, and you can go, Food and Water Watch did a great report if you want to see who the 17 banks are. And the other thing I was going to say is, we've got to do resistance like they're doing in Standing Rock. They're actually constructing the Sable pipeline right now in Florida through the Everglades, and it's a horrible thing. There was a wonderful video, the Gainesville News, or the Gainesville Gazette, whatever the name of their newspaper is. A woman reporter, Andrea somebody, did a beautiful video about how that is affecting one family in particular. And I think everybody who was going to go to Standing Rock but can't go there because of the weather should consider going to, Florida, because the weather's warm there. Also I found out about this new pipeline and new fracking project in New Mexico in Chacan Canyon, which is another sacred site. It's actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site that if you look at the ruins that they uncovered, they almost remind you of Machu Picchu. So the Diné tribe there is going to be fighting that, and I'm going to be sharing a lot more information because it's easy for us in California here to go to New Mexico. Unfortunately, what I found out when I spoke to this activist is that of the 20 pueblos there, only 4 of them oppose the fracking and the pipeline, and about 16 of them want the revenue from them. So they almost need to re-educate their own, population as to the value of the land in the way that all the tribes in Standing Rock have united to fight that pipeline. So that's what we need to do. We need to defund. We need to take our money out. We need to work on the effort to establish public banks. That's another cause I've been involved with, and I'm going to be talking with John Chung, who is our state treasurer. I've been talking with him for several years now, and he's been talking with Ellen Brown, who is the author of The Public Bank Solution and the nation's foremost expert on public banking. I would like him to be able to run on a platform of establishing a California state-owned bank. These are banks that actually lend to the community like banks are supposed to do, not package all the loans and sell them off to sovereign wealth funds. The only public bank in this country right now is the Bank of North Dakota. And what interested John Chung about this bank is that he said, we have a fiscal responsibility for the money. We have to invest it with private managers that know what they're doing. And I pointed out to him a couple of years ago that the pension funds, the state pension funds that are invested with these private managers, were getting like a 2.8% return on investment, whereas the Bank of North Dakota was getting anything from an 18 to a 24% return on investment every year. So these public banks are really the way to go for a variety of reasons. They provide loans to people for, buying homes and starting businesses and buying cars, exactly what a commercial bank was supposed to do, and what commercial banks probably were doing before they repealed Glass-Steagall, which was Bill Clinton. Don't forget, it was Bill Clinton and Robert Rubin, his Treasury Secretary from Goldman Sachs. And, of course, Trump's Treasury Secretary is from Goldman Sachs, Steve Mnuchin, who they have figured out knows nothing about banking regulation, because that's not the part of banks that he comes from. He comes from the banks that actually foreclose on people. He took over... He was the president of One West Bank. I hope people don't have their money in One West, because One West bought the assets of IndyMac, which was one of the largest funders of predatory loans, issuers of predatory loans. So they bought the assets of IndyMac for a fraction and then proceeded to foreclose on all these people, and that's how they made their money. And this is the guy that, Trump has put in as Treasury Secretary. So, we've got to get to public banks. We've got to get to renewable energy. I just finished putting a solar hot water heater on my roof, which I was able to get installed completely free because the utility was giving rebates up to $10,000. Luckily, I got in at the deadline. So the same company that installed my pool solar heater, let's see, when was that? In 1998. Today and yesterday, they were finishing the installation of my solar hot water heater. So we need to use renewable energy. We can do renewable energy and heat the whole country, provide energy for the whole country. Boone, North Carolina just did it. They just they passed a resolution to go 100% renewable energy. So it can be done. They used a plan that was written for them by Mark Jacobson from the Solutions Project. You can go to solutionsproject.org and you'll read all about him. He's a great scientist from Stanford who's come up with a way to make ourselves 100% clean energy dependent by 2030. And if there were the political will, we could do this by 2030, which is not too far off in the future. But he's sort of given up that there's the political will to do it by then. So now he's got these plans how we can do it by 2050. But in any case, we need to, be driving electric cars and, putting solar panels on our roofs and a whole bunch of things that we need to do as individuals, but we also need to act as a society. We need to resist these plants. I don't know how much of a spine the Democrats intend to grow right now in terms of resisting what Trump wants to do. They ought to be resisting everything that he wants to do in the same way that the Republicans resisted everything Obama wanted to do. But whether they have the numbers in Congress remains to be seen. We know that Harry Reid made it so they just need a simple majority to get his appointments through, because that's what they needed to do to get Obama's judges approved. So now it's coming back to bite them in the ass because all of these horrible Trump appointments are going to get approved. But, I think we need to fight our fights locally. Coming up in Los Angeles is going to be the Lisso Canyon gas storage facility that was shut down temporarily because there was a leak. They want to reopen that. And Food and Water Watch is leading an effort to get that permanently closed down. So there's going to be an action at a hearing in January. We don't know the date yet, but I will keep you informed. And finally, I just would like to put in another plug for my show that I do with Lily Starling and Dave Conan called The Robust Opposition. All you have to do is go to YouTube and find our channel, Our Revolution TV. Subscribe to our channel. You'll get notifications in your email when we're about to go live. We go live every Sunday from 10 to noon Pacific time. We're not going this week or next week because it's Christmas Day and New Year's Day. If we decide to do a show midweek, we'll let you know. And you can also like my other Facebook page, Lauren Steiner, The Robust Opposition, because the show will be live streaming there. We had some technical difficulties last week, and we're re-editing the show. So last week's show was incredible. We did it on fake news. We did it on the Russian scare. We did it on the electors. We did it on, we interviewed Bob Petrakis. He was our activist profile, an election integrity attorney and activist who was one of the lawyers running Jill Stein's recount effort. So it's a great show. It will be on YouTube probably tomorrow. And for now, I'm just going to sign off and remind everybody in Los Angeles to come to the corner of Hollywood and Vine tomorrow at 1:45, and then we're going to march to the Wells Fargo, and those of us who have accounts there are going to close our accounts, and then Jane Fonda is going to speak, and some celebrities, I guess, are going to speak, and then we're going to go over to the bank, to Chase Bank. So if you have your money in either of those two banks, now is the time to take them out. Tomorrow there's going to be media there, I'm pretty sure, and that's all. So hope to see you guys tomorrow. And if not, if you don't hear from me, if we don't do another show, I hope you have a very Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year, and I'll see you on the other side, 2017. Bye-bye.